85% of the world's population follows a religion, the top being Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. That means over 6 billion people refer to religion as a form of ethics to follow in their own lives. But what does religion mean for those who don't follow a religion, and what does it mean for those who do? These are some of the questions that Kip Anderson explored in his newest documentary, Christpiracy. And if either of those names sound familiar, it is because he is the director of Cowspiracy, Seaspiracy, and What the Health, all three of which you can find on Netflix. But if you've been on Netflix recently, you might have realized there was no Christpiracy recommendation, and that is true. Christpiracy was released on March 20th, 2024 in theaters and will be shown one more time on March 24th, 2024. So why didn't they choose to release this on Netflix? Well, Kip admitted at the very first scene of the documentary that Netflix wanted to censor part of the documentary, which I'm sure is going to hurt his relationship with Netflix, but he decided that the truth mattered more. And that is what we talk about here on this channel, is the truth. What is going on in the world? What is happening? How can we understand it? How can we adjust based off of these new truths and realize that the decisions that we make over our own lives matter more than any choices that other people make, if we choose to acknowledge it and to accept the power that we have over our own lives. And Cameron Waters took that power back into his own hands when he started to ask the question, how would Jesus kill an animal, and how can you kill something compassionately? Which is the exact question he asked to Kip Anderson during his screening of What the Health. Kip did not have an answer for him and was fairly intrigued by the question. Cameron then went to talk to him after the screening and elaborated on his story. Cameron Waters grew up in the Southern Baptist Church, where he was baptized and spent a great deal of his time. He even ended up becoming a gospel singer. But when he started to ask the questions of, would Jesus eat animals? Is this okay? How do you even kill compassionately? He started to meet a lot of resistance. The preachers and priests that he asked had no good answers for him, and he had to face that people didn't want to talk about this or didn't want to admit it. But then he followed up and continued to look, and he found the Daniel diet. Now, Daniel was one of the apostles who followed a diet that consisted of only fruits, vegetables, grains, seeds, and no animal products. So he was like, all right, I found my people. Now I want to explore this more. So he went online, found the DanielDietPlan.org, and was shocked to see that most of the recipes contained meat. Now, why would a church back up a plan that has nothing to do with the original wording and sayings of the Bible when it refers to Daniel? Now, he was surprised and reached out and asked them, why is there any meat in any of these recipes? And nobody responded. He felt disheartened and wanted to find the answers, so he got into his van and left the church on a journey to see what was going on, and wondered if this journey would take him further from his faith, and he ended up realizing that it wouldn't. When Kip heard all of this going on, he realized that though he had explored the environmental and the health impact of not eating animals or eating animals, he needed to explain the ethical impact of eating animals. And he decided to take on this journey with Cameron to explore this new world. They explored Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, to find a variety of answers that were very well laid out, and the underlying tone was, don't ask too many questions that the world does not want you asking. The Roman Church, the Roman Catholic Church at the Vatican is very powerful, and that was their first stop. They talked to a dean of theology and asked them the simple questions. Did Jesus eat animals? Of course he did. How did he kill them? Well, that question met a lot of resistance again. They didn't want to answer, and they were quickly removed from the room, and the interview was over. Many churches declined to participate in the questioning, and the ones that did had the same line of answers. Of course, Jesus did, and anybody that thought otherwise was crazy or was anti-God. And there was many videos that they showed of different churches addressing this issue on on various videos. So many people were butting up against this idea that Jesus could have been a person that did not participate in eating animals. And just as he had done in his previous documentaries, he said, well, if people are pushing back, there must be a connection to something bigger. And he was surprised to find out that the biggest church in the US was connected to Tyson. And they even had a prayer session together online. So what does this mean for Cameron and Kip as their journey continues? They looked to other religions to see if somebody else would answer in a better way. And though Kip wasn't particularly religious, he saw himself as spiritual and had a picture of the Dalai Lama. So he looked it up and he was like, well, one of the Buddhist concepts is that you don't kill beings, you don't kill others. So he looked it up. He's like, the Dalai Lama must not eat meat, and he found out that he did. So he went to other Buddhist monks and got these same murky answers that basically seemed to shift whenever the context of the question changed. And it always kept coming back to no clear answer as to why, and it was almost as if it was based off people's feelings versus anything concrete. So the question still stood, did Jesus eat animals? And if so, how would he kill them? And as they kept exploring this, various themes kept coming up. The reference to the Den of Thieves, which is the last biblical story before Jesus was crucified. The idea that Jesus was from Nazareth and that Jesus was beloved for his beliefs and for how he helped people. And the story of the Den of Thieves kept coming back to the main point of everything that they were looking into. Now, if you are religious or if you're not, you probably have heard of both of those concepts at some point or heard people allude to either. So the Den of Thieves is what Jesus referred to as the church that was, in his eyes, being changed or being used incorrectly. He goes into this church and he sees priests killing animals and so much blood everywhere, and that this was a common practice at the time. So it's very interesting to see that the priests were the ones killing these animals, and they went to the actual church that this biblical story is based off of in Israel. And Cam was the one that went in to look through things, and he realized that he was standing in one of the drainage channels of the blood so that all these animals could be killed and the blood could be sent out of the church. So what does this mean? It's no cover-up that the church was killing animals. That seems pretty standard with what we do nowadays. But the reality was that this was something that Jesus was against. And he stood up and he said, you are defiling what my Father has created here. And he stands up against what everybody is doing and is turning over of coins and throwing things and releasing animals, letting them fly away, letting them escape. And he says, you're defiling what my Father created. And it stands in very deep contrast with what we seem to understand about him. We thought that the Den of Thieves was all these people stealing money, but the actual translation that we later find out is thieves was not translated correctly from Hebrew, and the actual word means murderers. So he said, you den of murderers are defiling my Father's name, which is a very interesting perspective to look at from that lens. And you can go and look at the original text in Hebrew, and this is what they did. They were like, what is the word? Because some people say den of thieves and some say den of robbers, which is not the same word. So what is the actual word? And in the movie, they eventually find out that it is a den of murderers that he is referring to. So he is very much in opposition of these people slaughtering these animals, which is contradictory to what all of these new leaders in the religion on these videos are saying, that of course Jesus ate animals, like eating animals is super important and godlike So that was one of those moments where it's like, that's interesting. If Jesus is the one that is being followed, why are his teachings not being pushed forward? And it seems as if though this society that was benefiting and profiting off of killing animals was the one pushing their agenda further versus what the actual teachings were saying. So that is a really important perspective that they bring up. And then they also talk about the word capital means head of cows. That's where that word comes from. So it seems like capitalism, the church in this twisted way, and the government are all connected because the government officials were working with the priests and working with those who were making money off of this. So it is quite the elaborate breakdown of what is going on. And then going back to the Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus was never confirmed to have been from Nazareth. He never lived there. He never was born there. There was no connection that could be found. But the Nazareth people, the Nazarenes, were known as the people who only ate plants and who only ate from the ground and did not eat animals. So to say that Jesus of Nazareth is another interpretation of Jesus of the Nazareth people. And so seeing it from that light, and to see that Jesus was somebody who said, I do not believe in eating animals, I am here for all the living beings, is a really different perspective than most people are shared with and taught. Now, there's a great more detail that goes into the documentary, and it does a fairly impressive job of showing how currently today this is still ongoing in various religions, where killing animals is still centered in tradition and in culture, but not necessarily in the religious text of those places that this culture and tradition is being used on the foreground. So they continue to ask the question, well, can you kill compassionately? So they go to a place that kills free-range chickens, and they are asked, they're like, you seem to be a religious place, like, how are you killing compassionately? Is this what Jesus would have done? And they still cannot really answer that question. They say, like, we hope that he would have, but we don't really have any proof to say that he did do this. And they go, well, is hunting the more compassionate way to kill an animal? Like, this animal lived its whole life. And they show a very interesting scene with a kid who shoots a deer for the first time and is pretty disheartened by that decision and the actions that he decided to take. And he shows like the deer and a little baby cow, and that they look so similar, and he's like, I don't know if I feel great about this. And that is something that's often referred back to, is little kids don't like the idea of eating animals when they're presented with it. And a lot of times people say, well, you're supposed to, this is good for you, God says you should, and different contexts are used to justify these behaviors. And they go to various places, and they even go to a place that kills kosher and halal, and it doesn't answer those questions very well either. The animals are still suffering, the animals are crying, they're screaming, and they aren't really able to justify their decisions. And at one point they show how a lot of people that are imprisoned or immigrants are forced into slaughterhouses because these are some of the hardest places to work and hardest things to witness, the screaming of thousands of animals a day being sent to their death. So is this really the compassionate way that religions want us to move through life? If over 6 billion people see religion as the construct of their whole lives and the basis of their faith, is killing animals really part of that story, and should it be? So as the story continues, Jesus of Nazareth, we figure out that Jesus had a brother named James, and that James was also one of the Nazarenes who only ate fruits and vegetables, and he was later on killed by the Romans as well. So it seems like those who made money off of killing animals and subjugating them were the ones who were very against anybody who said that this was wrong. And you can see that nowadays too, that there's a strong connection between church and state and those making money off of it who are still profiting from these same things. So did Jesus die standing up for animals and for people who were enslaved? And it seems so, because a few days after the Den of Thieves story, he was crucified by the Romans, who were the ones running the church at the time. So it seems like that is the cover-up of the century or of the millennia, that this person who is seen as a beacon of hope and faith and compassion has been used as a puppet for an industry that is continuing to propagate these false ideas of a person who stood up for those who nobody was standing up for. And there is various moments within the documentary that you have to question what else is being hidden, and he does explore a great deal of that in his other documentaries, which I have talked about before. And if you get the chance to see this documentary, I highly recommend it. But there is the final piece that people say that we have dominion over earth, dominion over animals, that people have dominion. And when you look at the definition of dominion, it means stewardship. It means that you are responsible for. And if we do have dominion over this earth, are we not responsible for the animal and the planet? And animals, the planet, and its people. And they very clearly show how people are also being negatively affected by killing all these animals. It is not easy to listen to the screams and the cries, and they do showcase how we are constantly within society hurting all these people and ourselves. If you look at his What the Hell documentary, and why are we doing this is the question. And if you are a person who is religious or chooses not to embody religion at all, there is very clear ways that religion continues to affect us, and the decisions that people used to make are affecting us. Animal agriculture gets a lot of cuts for taxes, and they get a lot of help from the government, and at the end of the day, their impact on our health and the impact on our environment is all constantly feeding back into one another. So it is time that we understand that the world that we live in is not as transparent as we want it to be, and that there is a great deal of censorship, which the documentary filmmakers encountered as well. They were being stalked, they were being hunted down in certain ways, and they had their house broken into, they were being followed, and a lot of it was those people just wanted to steal their documentation and to stop this from getting out. And it's difficult to be on the side that most people don't agree with, and it's a lot easier to stand behind what everybody else is doing. But if you can take a step back and realize maybe this isn't what I want, there's a world out there that is vast and it's wide, and there's definitely a lot of good out there, but there's a lot of bad that is moving things in the shadows. And once we shine a light on it, and once we know about it, we must do something about it. So what are you going to do with the information that's presented to you? And you definitely don't have to believe me or the documentary or anyone. There is information that exists, and I will eventually talk more about the censorship that I'm seeing based off of just stuff that I can't get access to that I once was able to. There's a lot of documentaries that I watched in 2016, 2015 that no longer exist, or they do exist, but it's really hard to find access to it. So what does this mean for all of us? We just recently did a video on TikTok potentially getting banned. How can we live and continue to live in this world where we aren't allowed to make these decisions for ourselves, which must mean that there's a lot of power in us once we think for ourselves and do things for ourselves. So check out the documentary, check out Cowspiracy, Seaspiracy, What the Health. There's a lot of other documentaries, and there's so much for us to learn about this world. And this is just one step to getting us closer to that, but the decisions you make about your life are the most important. So what decisions are you gonna make next? Please let me know down below what you think, if you've seen the documentary, if you're gonna see it, if you think this is all crazy. But this world is yours, enjoy it. I'll see you soon. Have a great week.